with arts, films and arts basically, the more ethnic and rooted you get, the more global and universal the film becomes. Like, so, though it's set in my world, the emotions and the injustices we are discussing are universal. In the process of making the film, we saw so much of human rights violation all over the world. African American youngster being shot in the US just because he was he didn't stop when a cop stopped him, and he thought like he shot him because he was black. So it was all over. While we were shooting, like 20 Tamilians were shot in Andhra Pradesh. So many things were happening around the world. So these are things that has been always there, and when a film is made around it, it resonates throughout. And when we were screening the film for the Oscars there, it had so much of relevance at that point during the elections, and we were there when the election results were coming out. So it had so much of relevance, and the minorities there were able to connect so much to the film. And though they were a little hesitant to accept the way the film was made, they were so much into the content. So I feel that and also, like, see, this film represents me, my world I come from, and they were not able to understand what is Telugu, what is Tamil, and we had to use a new technique in terms of subtitles for people to understand. So what we did was we used yellow color subtitles for Telugu and white for Tamil, so that they understand the language difference. So they were not able to understand the language difference. So we had to do this, and which was the first time. The digital film guys didn't have a technology to do it, so we had to do it like we have to generate it graphically. The subtitles we had to create it graphically. It was not like a regular subtitle. It had, we had to put in more work into this idea. So we try more to make people understand of the difference, and this is the world that we want to show or share with the outsiders. Some might say that why do we have to show this? We have better things to show. Well, I feel that this is something that we need to say. So and also this is like this is something that I can connect with, and these are certain things that I care about and I want to share with. So if a film doesn't let me grow as a person while in the process of making the film, then I can't do that film. See, either it has to give my, it has to broaden me as a person, or it has to broaden my social and political concerns. If that doesn't happen, then I can't connect with the film that I'm making.
Interestingly, that also makes me think about how probably the difference between business people who don't necessarily create but have a business, but the difference between people like you who actually create the product itself or create content itself, and therefore what is the kind of emotional, you're so vested in it, right? So what is the kind of emotional attachment that you have with whatever you create? And therefore the concept of, what I like to think of, what many spiritual leaders talk about, detached attachment. So you create something and then you put it to bed, it's made, and then it does not always necessarily do well as you anticipate for it to do. And then how do you kind of, I'm sure this is true of people in the world of business. You put out a product and it doesn't necessarily give you the returns that it's meant to. How do you kind of, what is that whole idea of, how do you deal with that whole emotional attachment that you probably have to something that you've created? Mati?
I think your work is always an extension of you at any point, right? So like, especially in the arts, I'm sure, and I'm sure in business as well, it's just an extension of who you are. And that process, the more you better yourself, the more you better your product is what I feel. So I'm growing to believe as time goes on. But I didn't quite completely understand the second half of the question though.
Yeah, basically that you're attached, you're vested, right? And you, as a creator, you have created something.
Yeah.
And but when once it's gone to press, once the film is out, it's the public
But
kind of
it's-
judges
yeah.
it, and it probably doesn't do as well as you expect it for it to do. But how do you kind of like, how do you detach
with
yourself
yourself.
from that and kind of wake up the next day to
Morning, yeah.
actually create something else?
I don't think you can actually ever detach yourself. I mean, I don't think it's possible to detach yourself from your product because it's something that you've made with so much love and not in love. It's just it's just something that you wanted to say and you've made something to say it. And then to detach, you can't detach because that is your opinion or that is your thought. But at the same time, our minds always, I think, sometimes actively work to defend our work, right? Which is also a problem. We always are built in a way to defend every label that we put out because we think that we have to defend it. But that's where also I think things require correcting, they require correcting. If you think that you have to do something better in some department, you've got to do that better. So I think it's just a way of learning, I guess, and evolving as a person with your craft more than anything else.
Karthik, I'm just going to ask you a question about the whole, the target group. When you create, like, could you talk to us about Indo Soul? And when you created Indo Soul, who was it meant for? Did you have like someone or a target group in mind when you were creating this sound?
Not really. I didn't go about it in a way like, okay, I want to make music, now what's going to be my target? Wasn't the way I went about it. I think like any business, the customer, and in my case, the listener is the most important. We make our music, we put a lot of efforts, but then the listener is the one who listens to it, and if it resonates with him or her, they share it, and that's how the work gets spread among the people, and that's very important for anyone who creates something. Having said that, it was, I just think it's important to be as authentic as possible in terms of whatever creative energy that you put. Try to be as honest with yourself, not try to be some other person, not try to be like someone. And once that happens, I think there's sort of something resonates with the listener. And I've been quite surprised by the type of people who have listened to our stuff. I've never had a feeling of it's going to be this person, but it's sort of crossed. We've had younger people, we've had also older people whom normally I would have thought, oh, okay, they would probably prefer to listen to a traditional form of classical music, but they've also really liked it. So in that sense, there wasn't any target audience to begin with. And the fact that we can put our music in social media like YouTube means that it's available to anyone who likes this form of music, and that's really helped us a lot in taking our music to different corners,
Right. But typically there's a mindset of a kind of people who, kind of become your target group in a sense, right? Like, I mean, they may be old, young, the demographics,
For
but
me,
it's also like about, if you like a particular kind of cinema, then you are also in some sense, it's possible that you will like that kind of cinema. Would you agree with me, or
for me, it's true. For me, in a way, it was to say traditional Carnatic music comes from a very, it's part of our civilization. It's got hundreds and probably thousands of years of history behind it. It's evolved. But then I found that there's sort of a disconnect between, say, an urban youth, because you need to have a prerequisite of having some knowledge before you can enjoy Carnatic music. When I learned Carnatic music, only when I started playing concerts and when I started discussing music with my musicians whom I played with, I really started to enjoy it after about 5-6 years of learning it. So once you understand Carnatic music, it's an ocean. You can just be immersed in it forever. But for this to happen, it doesn't happen to everyone. And for me, there was a need to sort of translate Carnatic music to keep its integrity, but also provide it create it on a plane that would be palatable to an urban, say, a person who goes to a coffee place or a pub, to hang out with his or her friends, and also on a global level to sort of give Indian music with sort of a familiarity of the guitars and the drums. This is something which I've noticed after we've made the music. This really helps a lot because you know it's easy for people to sort of understand the nuances of the music when it's provided on some more of a global plane or on a plane which someone can understand easily. And that's the plane that I come from in my life. I always felt I had to go beyond the traditional, the walls that were surrounding the traditional music. I loved the music, but I felt a yearning to, you know, break through the walls and do something that that was more integrated in terms of who we are, who I was. And I guess it's sort of worked out with the listeners as well, like whoever listened to our music. That's precisely what I hear from them, yeah. Thankfully, there haven't been too many people who've said, oh, you've taken Carnatic music and you've changed it. This is something I was prepared for, but maybe I've been doing something right, or I probably haven't been doing something wrong. It's always important for me to retain the integrity of the composition, so I haven't really crossed anyone off in terms of changing the music from what it was.
Vetrimaran, just one question about what is running in your mind? I'm always very curious about, are you always thinking cinema? Are you always thinking about, how preoccupied are you with your craft?
The moment you finish your first script, you stop living your life. You start, like, everything turns into a good scene. Like, if my wife and I get into an argument, halfway through she'll stop and say, no, I'm not saying further, you'll put this in a scene. I'm not saying. Even before she could say that, I would have had it in a scene. So that happens. Like, you stop living life normally. So to break out of it and try and get a new experience without attaching a tag to it. Okay, this might be helpful for a script that I'm going to work, so let me go experience this. To get out of it and to look at life as life is really challenging for a script writer. Really challenging, and I don't think I've succeeded doing it. So it's a tough thing. Even if I'm doing something, back of the mind I'll feel, okay, so this might be useful for a script sometime in my life. So let me understand this fully, so that it might it'll be of lesser work when I'm writing the script. That's how the mind works. And to get out of it and lead, be as a normal person is the biggest challenge. So I try to do it, like, in various ways. I sometimes I ride my bike, and I stop traveling in I stop traveling by flight. I take cars and go for long drives, and I just ask my assistants not to come to my office and try to do my work on my own. And I try to do all these things, but ultimately it all gets back to one point of looking at life as a source for script. So this is something that
you cannot.
That has to change. I'm trying to change.
I thought I could ask all of you to actually respond to the idea of how some of the values, what you think are the values in the arts that are important or that mirror the values in the world of business.
Okay.
Because this is a business forum. Sure. And if you can share with us, what values are common to both these worlds?
So more than, maybe not exactly values, because we'd be going to integrity, honesty, all of that. But I think more so, something I think businesses at least can take from the arts especially is is a lot of empathy that is required, right? So I was in Coimbatore recently, and there was an ATM, and going to that ATM, just looking at this guy suffer, like, he gave me his PIN number, he's asking me to use it, and why? Because that ATM responds only in English. Okay, so it's like, you wouldn't make, like, when you're creating something, you create with some level of empathy, or you want people to have, you're sharing a story. But it's scary when, when a product like that is built with absolutely no empathy, no care in the world whether this old man can use it or not. But he's expected to go put some pin number somehow, even though he can't read, and use it. That's something I think we need to think. And just to take off on that just a little bit, so one of the recent articles by Mark Cuban, so he says that in the next 20 years, the major leaders, and I'm not saying just because we are here, but art leadership is supposed to become the next business leadership, because once the automation of automation is complete, that is, once everything is automated, the need for different languages, to code philosophy and liberal arts is going to be the next thing. So I think that's again another thing that business leaders can take from the arts possibly.
Karthik, what are your thoughts?
I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of even for an artist, it's important to have like a purpose and a vision and all that. So I wouldn't go into that. But for me, what is different is that for both streams, there are 100 ways about creating a solution. But the difference with the art is that there's 100 ways of creating 100 different solutions, and no solution is is the right thing. So I feel like there's a lot of intangibles involved. As an artist, you do something and it might not give you a direct return, but then maybe 6 months down the line, something else will happen. And I think it's something for every entrepreneur to think about, because this not just applies to artists. You put your inputs in and something else might flower out of there. And for me, this sort of an intangible input, it could be marketing, or it could just be something that in terms of how you're working with your colleagues or the people under you. But it's something to ponder about in terms of looking at an artist who works in a field where there are unlimited possibilities. There's no certain outcome. There's no sales figure to reach, or there's no, okay, this is my target. Yeah. It could be anything. So I think this is sort of very interesting difference. But I think these intangibles and the things that go into an artist, being an entrepreneur, I think apply for the other things as well. It's just that you might not see it within 2 months. You might not achieve the target. But on a long-term level, I think the same inputs would really help even the entrepreneurs.
I'll ask you also to share just what you think
for me, the primary thing about arts is the profits of art is not only evaluated with the money that you make, but with the change that you bring in within yourself and the people around you and the people who experience your art. So that way I feel the business module of need for profit is fine, but the greed for profit always hurts, and it hurts you, it hurts people around you, it hurts the consumers, it hurts everybody. Whereas art really doesn't do that. Okay, so now art has to be put in quotes. So, I'm talking about people who take their work seriously and who are able to come up with sensible work. So that doesn't hurt you, it lets you grow as a person, and it is not measured only by the money it makes, it is measured by a lot of other components. So that way business module should be set up in such a way that it is sustainable, where it supports sustainable lifestyle and not just suck out the profit as parasites and let the host die.